Okay, so welcome. We're going to talk about habitual thoughts today because for each letter of happier we are going to choose a word or a theme that helps. So habitual thoughts is our theme for this video. Okay, now I'm going to cover this up, the rest of this, because if there's one thing we know about our thoughts, it's they tend to go all over the place, alright? So this is going to help us focus, which is a bit of a theme for this video. So, there are three things I want to say about habitual thoughts in the connection to being happier. First is getting to know the voice in our head is incredibly helpful. So, before you think this is a bit worrying, I've got a voice in my head, I know you've got a voice in your head. And what really helps our happiness is to notice what it says to us. Okay, so this really is about when we make a mistake, what do we say to ourselves? When we make a decision that we sort of almost immediately regret, what do we tell ourselves? Do we tell ourselves off? Do we tell ourselves we're clumsy? Do we say that's typical of me, I can't believe I did that? Do we, are we kind of mean to ourselves? Now, a really good example of this, I think that most people can relate to, is when we look in the mirror. So when you look in the mirror, what do you see, what do you say, what do you feel? I've caught myself out so many times with how I'm making judgments about how I'm looking on a particular day or what my hair's happening is doing, or just stuff that isn't helpful really to start thinking. So I think we know that feeling about the mirror, and I think therefore it's worth noticing those voices at other times as well. So it's whether we're in a meeting and we say something that someone disagrees with and we regret bringing it up, or it's having a conversation with our partner and we realise we just didn't word it the way we might have done, it didn't go as well as it should have done, and what we tell ourselves after. So really this is about saying, we have so many thoughts a day. I think, you can read so many things about this and, be my guest to find out other statistics, but I think we have at least something like 50,000 thoughts a day. So we really need to be very clear with ourselves, I think, about what those thoughts are and what we're telling ourselves. So another way of thinking about this is beginning to think, whose voice is it really? So what I mean by that is that what most of us have done throughout our lives is absorbed other people's views of us and what we're like. And some of that's positive, some of it's great, some of it's true, some of it might not be true, who knows? But I guess classic examples of that are we have our parents' thoughts and voices in our heads, we have our teachers' thoughts and voices, we have previous partners or old friends' voices in our heads. And we also need to maybe distance ourselves and choose not to have their voices in our heads anymore when they're not helpful to us, when they don't spur us on, when it's not kind and loving. So that's number one, voice in your head, get to know it. Number two for today is really just getting your head around the fact that we can choose our thoughts. Now that might sound obvious to some of you and it might be a real revelation to others. I know that for me, quite some years ago now, I began to get my head around the fact that my thoughts didn't just land in my head. My feelings when I woke up in the morning at the end of the day weren't just random, it was absolutely connected to the thoughts I'd had. And then a step back from that is that the thoughts I'd had, I had chosen. So strangely enough, and we're strange beings, aren't we? Some of the thoughts I was choosing just weren't helpful. They weren't positive, they weren't fair, they weren't even true, they often weren't kind. That might be about other people or about myself, but we definitely choose our thoughts, and taking a bit of control back over that is incredibly helpful and certainly helped me to feel happier, because you're less at the victim and things are being done to me end of life when you choose your thoughts consciously. Okay, so there are so many people that have talked about this and the impact of it. Lots of people, thousands of years before him in fact, but there's something, Michael Neal is a good example of someone that recognises the power of our thoughts, saying that actually, I'm paraphrasing, but really the next thought you have determines what the world looks like to you, how your life plays out. The next thought you have matters. So choose it wisely. Another thing that he and a number of other people talk about is really the comedy in the fact that we kind of just make stuff up, we just have a thought, which is fine and that's great and it's creative and we need to have thoughts, I think. But we also just then insist on believing them, and that's maybe the comedy of it, is that we randomly make something up and then we get attached to it and believe it, and that's not always helpful either. Okay, so that's quite a big thing to get your head around, so just sit with that for a second. Okay, and number 3 is that really our thoughts and our beliefs are our filter on the world. Okay, so the way I choose to see things, what I focus on starts to look like what the world is to me. Does that make sense? There's a saying in NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, a kind of presupposition it's called in that context, which is the map is not the territory. That I find incredibly helpful. So it's a reminder really that we are only ever seeing a representation of how things are, and that representation is about our filters, what we choose to notice, to ignore, and to focus on. And again, this is about taking some control back to what we choose to see. The world is so full, it's so full of things and places and people and ideas that we can't take it all in, and recognising that we're choosing what to take in, and maybe if that's not working brilliant for us, choosing to take other stuff in is incredibly helpful in terms of feeling happier. Okay, so they're the 3 things I wanted to talk to you about. Now, I think with anything, any kind of behaviour change, any kind of adjustment we want to have to how we're experiencing the world, we need to start putting things into action quite quickly, okay? Which is fitting because this is about to fall off if I don't get around to it. Sticky flip chart is amazing, but you know, it's not perfect. It's not perfect. Okay, so these are 3 things I'd love you to do today, okay? And they're small things. So the first one is just notice the voice in your head. You don't have to correct it. Certainly really try hard not to get annoyed with yourself for what it's saying, because that begins to defeat the objective. We start telling ourselves off about the voices telling ourselves off. That goes somewhere a bit weird. So this is genuinely just notice the sort of thoughts you have. And the reason I call this habitual thoughts is we tend to have the same sort of thoughts on a loop, a lot of us, a lot of the time. So notice what those thoughts are in your loop, okay? The second thing is just experiment with not believing all of your thoughts today. So we have so many thoughts, even if you just choose one. So the next random thought that occurs to you, just see how it feels, to distance yourself from it, recognise it just sort of sprung up out of somewhere, and that it may not be true. So this isn't getting into a complicated thing about whether this is true or false or different perspectives, but it's just beginning to accept that just because you had a thought, you don't have to believe it. You can just dismiss it and wait for another thought to come along. It's really freeing to do that kind of thing. Okay, so the number 3, I'm having difficulty with my numbers today. So the third one, number 3, is see what you see when you change your focus. And this is a pair of glasses, okay, it's not cherries or anything else. It's a pair of glasses, and this is a reminder that really we get what we focus on. Okay, so what I'd ask you to do today, just as a little experiment really, is choose to focus on something that you don't usually focus on. And it's absolutely up to you, and maybe you need to go and do your next thing before you recognise what that might be. But it could be that if you're on your way to work, or way back from work, you might decide to notice all the people that are wearing blue, or all the people that are reading a paperback rather than a Kindle or something like that, or all the different animals you see, whether they're real and in a field, or whether in fact they are on adverts or posters. Just think, today I'm going to notice all the animals around, or all the plants around. And that's all I'm asking, just have a go, because for me the value in that is it really tells us how powerful our focus is, because you will see things you would not have seen if you'd been thinking about and looking for other things, okay? So just 3 things. Enjoy today. You can adjust your thoughts and your habits, as you know, and happiness and feeling happier is so much about that. It genuinely is all about what's going on in here. It really is. Enjoy today. Thank you for listening.